Imagine this. You wake up one morning, and the voice inside your head is not yours anymore. It doesn't whisper, it commands. Get up. Do the work. Do not negotiate with weakness. No drama. No motivation quotes. No feel-good speeches. Just a cold presence. Disciplined. Unforgiving. Laser-focused. And then you realize something disturbing. This version of you has always existed. You just never awakened it. Because most people are trained to believe the enemy is out there. Competition. The economy. The world. Luck. Opportunity. Other people. But warriors discover the truth early. The battlefield is not outside. The battlefield is inside the skull. And the enemy is subtle. It hides behind perfectly reasonable excuses. I'm tired, I don't feel like it today. I'll start when I'm ready. It's not the right time. I need more clarity first. No swords. No armies. No dramatic showdown. Only a silent war, fought in kitchens at midnight. On beds when alarms ring. In quiet moments no one ever sees. And here's the part that unsettles most people. Some minds are trained for war. Most minds are trained for comfort. The difference determines everything. Your future, your relationships, your health, your destiny. And yet, nobody teaches this. Not in school, not in college, not in most families. We learn math, we learn history, we learn how to fit in, but we are never shown the operating manual for the mind. And when life finally strikes loss, humiliation, failure, rejection, people crumble not because they are weak, but because they were never trained. This is not a motivational video. This is not a 5-step morning routine. This is forbidden knowledge most people are terrified to confront. Your mind is either your weapon or your prison, and the choice is made every day, quietly, without witnesses. Today you're going to see what happens when someone decides to train their mind like a warrior, and why so few ever do. There is an old proverb whispered in monasteries and military academies. Before you defeat the world, defeat the noise within. Simple. But here's the mystery. Why do some human beings, with ordinary lives, ordinary genetics, ordinary backgrounds, suddenly become unstoppable? They're not smarter, they're not lucky, they're not chosen. Something happens, something shifts, as if a switch flips and hesitation disappears. They move differently, decide differently, endure differently. They stop negotiating with themselves. People around them don't understand. How did you change? What happened to you? Why don't you break anymore? And they smile because they know the truth. They entered a different kind of training. Not in the gym, not in business seminars, not in self-help books, but inside the dark corridors of their own mind. And there is one question that starts everything. What if the voice that controls your life has been lying to you? That question is dangerous, because once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. And that is where our story begins. The city is quiet. Streetlights burn like tired sentinels. Windows glow. People scroll through phones, drifting into sleep. And in a small apartment, a man sits at the edge of his bed staring at the floor. His name is Raphael. Not a warrior, not a monk, not a legend. Just exhausted. Bills on the table. Unanswered emails. A gym membership he rarely uses. Goals written in notebooks, never completed. He used to believe he was meant for more. But every year the gap widened between who he was and who he imagined he could become. He had tried everything. Motivational videos, productivity apps, vision boards, affirmations. He would wake up inspired, and by noon, he'd collapse into the same patterns. Procrastination, self-doubt, overthinking, escapism. He would say, tomorrow, like a ritual prayer. Tomorrow, he'd wake up early. Tomorrow, he'd eat clean. Tomorrow, he'd build habits, get focused, become disciplined. But tomorrow always arrived, dressed in familiar fatigue, and every night, as the world slept, a quiet dread pressed against his chest. What if this is it? What if I never change? He started to avoid mirrors. He avoided silence. Silence made the inner voice louder. The worst part wasn't failure. The worst part was knowing he was capable of more, and watching himself do nothing, like being handcuffed inside his own life. And then, something happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a moment, small, almost forgettable. But certain lives turn on moments like these. Raphael was sitting alone in a cafe, staring at his reflection in the window. He looked tired, not physically tired in the eyes. Across from him sat an older man, quiet, composed, unreadable, the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, yet somehow controls the room. Raphael didn't know why, but he kept glancing at him. The man ate slowly, moved deliberately, checked his phone only once. Even the way he breathed seemed intentional. On his wrist, a worn bracelet with a single inscription. Mind first. Their eyes met for a second. The older man nodded politely. Something in that calm unsettled Raphael, and that's when the inner monologue attacked. Look at him. He's disciplined. You're not. You quit everything you start. You will always be like this. Raphael lowered his head, defeated by a voice no one else could hear. Then the older man stood, walked past him, paused, and said quietly, "You know, the mind can be trained." Raphael looked up, surprised. The man continued, "Most people live as servants to whatever thought screams the loudest. Hunger says eat, fear says hide, laziness says later, emotion says quit." He studied Raphael carefully, but warriors. He tapped the bracelet. Learn to command the voice, not obey it. Raphael tried to laugh it off. "I've tried discipline," he said. "It never sticks." The man leaned closer. "That's because you tried to motivate the slave instead of training the warrior." And then he walked out. No explanation. No dramatic exit, just a sentence left like a key on the table. You tried to motivate the slave instead of training the warrior. That night, Raphael lay awake, replaying the words. Something inside him cracked, not like breaking, more like an old wall giving way. He realized his life wasn't controlled by circumstances. It was controlled by a voice, soft, persuasive, always reasonable, but ultimately destructive. A voice that said, "Take it easy. Do it later. You deserve a break. No one will know if you skip. One more episode. One more scroll. Your different discipline isn't your thing." And for the first time, he questioned it. What if this voice isn't me? What if it's just a pattern trained over years, pretending to be truth? A shiver moved through him, because if that was real, then everything was different. Change wasn't about motivation. It wasn't about feeling inspired. It wasn't about waiting for the right moment. It was about one brutal reality. Your mind is either trained by you or conditioned by your weakness. Raphael stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I don't want to live like this anymore." But vows are cheap. He'd made that promise before. What made this night different wasn't emotion. It was the seed of suspicion. Maybe the mind could be rebuilt like muscle. Maybe discipline wasn't personality, but training. And standing on the threshold of this realization, he felt fear. Because training the body is painful, but training the mind requires walking into rooms most people keep locked. Memories, traumas, failures, shame, excuses. The places we hide from. He closed his eyes and saw flashes of his past. The project he abandoned. The relationship he sabotaged. The opportunities he talked himself out of. He saw a pattern. He wasn't unlucky. He was untrained, and once you see the pattern, you can never pretend again. That night alone, no applause, no dramatic music, Raphael made the quiet commitment warriors make. From now on, I train. He didn't know how. He didn't know where to begin, but he sensed something ancient and dangerous ahead. Not self-help, not motivation. A system people whispered about but rarely completed, a path where the weak version of you does not survive, and somewhere in the shadows of history, warriors, monks, generals, philosophers had all walked it before him. He was about to discover what they knew, and why the world never teaches it. Because a trained mind is difficult to manipulate, difficult to distract, difficult to control. And society runs smoothly when minds remain comfortable. But Raphael was done being comfortable. He was ready to enter the war. A war with no spectators, no medals, no cheers, only transformation. And it all begins with a single decision. Stop negotiating with a voice that keeps you small. He took a breath, stood up, and stepped into a journey that would break him, reshapes him, and reveal a truth buried deep in ancient wisdom. Warriors are not born. They are built, one thought at a time. And what he was about to learn would challenge everything he believed about discipline, identity, and strength. Because the real training was not physical. It was psychological, invisible, relentless, and absolutely unforgiving. The next morning, Raphael searched for the man. He returned to the cafe 3 days in a row. Nothing. But on the 4th day, taped quietly to the back of a chair, he noticed a small folded note. No name, no signature, just one sentence. Mind first, body second, action third, repeat without mercy. And a list of names: Marcus Aurelius, Miyamoto Musashi, Bodhidharma, Epictetus, Tibetan monks of the Jalug order, Spartan commanders. Beside each name, a similar phrase had been written. Control the mind gives control the behavior. Control the behavior gives shape the identity. Shape the identity, then destiny. Raphael began researching. He discovered something unsettling. Different civilizations, different languages, different eras, but the core principle was identical. Warriors did not trust motivation. They did not rely on emotion. They did not wait to feel ready. They built systems that turned discipline into instinct. A Roman emperor wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." Marcus Aurelius, the samurai swordsman, warned, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain." Musashi, a Stoic slave turned philosopher, said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." These men did not live comfortable lives. War, betrayal, loss, uncertainty. And yet they moved through chaos with a stillness Raphael couldn't comprehend. They possessed something he did not. Inner command. Not confidence, not self-esteem. Command. A state where thoughts obey intention, where impulses are noticed, but not automatically followed, where emotions are acknowledged but not allowed to rule. And slowly a pattern emerged. Zen monks trained by stillness, samurai trained by repetition, Stoics trained by cognitive discipline, Tibetan monks trained by attention and breath. Different techniques, same destination. The warrior does not fight the world until he has conquered himself. They all spoke of a hidden system. First, interrupt the automatic voice. Second, install deliberate habits like armor. Third, act consistently until identity reforms. Mind, behavior, identity, in that order, not the other way around. Most people attempt identity first. I'm just not disciplined. I'm not a morning person. I've never been consistent. They narrate failure into their personality. Warriors do the opposite. They start with obedience to a small command. Get up, breathe, move, focus, not because they feel powerful, but because consistency reshapes reality. Raphael understood there was no secret hack, no magical ritual, no instant transformation. It was training, ancient, repetitive, uncompromising. And the cost was this: you must let the old version of yourself die. A quiet funeral. For excuses, Raphael wanted proof. Something scientific, modern, rational. He dug through articles, lectures, podcasts, books, research from Harvard, MIT, Yale, and beyond. And suddenly, everything ancient began to make frightening sense. Harvard cognitive scientists described the habit loop: cue, routine, reward. Your brain conserves energy. It automates behaviors that repeat. That voice telling Raphael to snooze the alarm wasn't mystical sabotage. It was the basal ganglia, the brain's automatic control center, optimizing survival by repeating familiar comfort. MIT researchers studying habit formation discovered something brutal. Once a habit forms, the brain stops fully participating in decision-making, which means if you have practiced avoidance, your brain automates avoidance. If you have practiced quitting, your brain automates quitting. If you have practiced procrastination, your brain automates procrastination. Not because you're weak, because you've trained it. Yale research on identity formation added another layer. Repeated behavior eventually rewrites self. The brain begins saying, I do this, therefore I am this. Action, identity. Not identity, action. And then came decision fatigue. Stanford and Columbia psychologists found the more decisions you make in a day, the worse your choices become. That's why elite performers remove unnecessary choices. Same morning routine, same training windows, same environment cues, not obsession. Efficiency. Every unnecessary decision drains willpower, and willpower researches learned behaves like a muscle. It weakens when overused. It strengthens through strategic training. This was the bridge. Ancient warriors didn't have fMRI machines or behavioral studies, but they observed reality through experience. Choices drain power. Repetition builds resilience. Identity follows disciplined action. They weren't mystical, they were practical. Raphael sat back in his chair, stunned. The older man was right. He hadn't failed because he lacked motivation. He failed because he had been negotiating with an automated brain trained for comfort. To win, he would have to rewire it through repetition, through friction, through deliberate exposure to discomfort, not chaos, but controlled challenge. Zen monks call it sitting with the dragon. Stoics call it voluntary hardship. Neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity. Different words, same battlefield. And Raphael began to understand why warriors rarely speak loudly about this. Because once you accept that your mind can be trained, you lose the luxury of excuses. Training began quietly. He set his alarm earlier, not 5 hours earlier. Not extreme, just earlier. He placed the phone across the room. He prepared clothes the night before. He left water on the table beside his shoes. Simple choices, engineered intentionally. Morning came. The alarm pierced the darkness, and then the voice. Soft, persuasive, familiar. You slept late. You worked hard yesterday. One day won't matter. You deserve rest. It wasn't aggressive. It sounded like a friend. His body felt heavy, the bed warm, the room cold. A storm of signals surged from deep biology. Comfort, preservation, energy, conservation. This wasn't laziness. This was evolutionary programming trying to pull him back into safety. The old Raphael would have complied, but he remembered. The voice is not truth. The voice is conditioning. He whispered to himself. Stand up. Not because it feels right, but because it trains the command. He stood. His heartbeat rose, not from exertion, but from confrontation. This was the war. Not at the gym, not in the office. Here, in the decision space, every morning became a battlefield, and the enemy used every weapon. Self-doubt. You're pretending. This won't last. Comparison. Other people are naturally disciplined. You're not built like them. Old identity. You've always been like this. People don't change. Emotional temptation. Be productive later. Watch something first. Ease into the day. Biological urges. Hunger. Fatigue. Stress. Every urge screamed. Return to the familiar. But Raphael learned one tactic. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He issued commands. 5 breaths. Cold water. Move for 10 minutes. Start. Do nothing. He wasn't chasing perfection. He was sending signals to the brain. I am the one who decides. Every small victory carved a new neural path. Some days, he failed. He overslept. He scrolled too long. He skipped tasks, and the voice tried to weaponize guilt. See, you're the same. But this time he did something radical. He refused self-hatred and restarted immediately. No dramatic speech. No, I'll try again next week. Restart within minutes. Because warriors don't worship failure or success. They worship consistency. And slowly, the internal war changed tone. The voice didn't vanish, but it grew quieter. Less convincing. He noticed something surprising. Suffering didn't increase. Anxiety decreased, because indecision is torture. Obedience, paradoxically, brought peace. Not submission to weakness. Submission to higher command, to the version of himself he was building. Weeks later, the test arrived. Not heroic, not cinematic. Just life. Work exploded. Deadlines stacked. A relationship collapsed. Sleep vanished. Family problems resurfaced. Stress flooded every corner of his mind, and the voice returned with venom. TC's stupid. You don't have time for discipline now. Focus on survival. The training can wait. It sounded logical. Reasonable. Almost kind. One morning, Raphael sat on the edge of his bed, shaking with exhaustion. His body ached, his chest tight. Eyes burning, he thought. Maybe the warrior thing was just a phase. He stared at the floor, the same spot where, weeks earlier, he had first whispered, I don't want to live like this anymore. He felt the familiar pull toward old patterns. Skip today, skip tomorrow. Start fresh later, and something inside him broke. Not in despair. In clarity, he realized, if he only trained when life was convenient, then nothing had really changed. He wasn't a warrior. He was still a servant obedient to circumstance instead of command. A memory surfaced. Monks meditating through storms. Samurai practicing in winter cold. Stoics writing during exile, illness, humiliation. They did not wait for calm. They trained in chaos. Because chaos is reality. He stood slowly, not inspired, not powerful, just unwilling to surrender. He whispered through clenched teeth, if I quit now, I train quitting. And that sentence became a blade. He moved. 10 minutes. Shaky. Imperfect. But he completed it. And something shifted, not outside, inside. A deeper voice, quieter than fear, older than habit, spoke for the first time. This is who you are becoming. He didn't feel victorious. He felt anchored, because he finally understood the truth. Anyone can be disciplined on a good day. Warriors are forged on the bad ones. He collapsed into a chair, breathing hard, sweat cooling on his skin, not from exertion, but from defiance. And in that stillness, another realization emerged. This wasn't about productivity, not about goals, not about aesthetics. This was about identity. Who commands the mind? The trained warrior, or the frightened child inside who learned to hide? Raphael knew the real battle had only begun, but for the first time, he sensed something terrifying and beautiful. He was capable of transformation. Not because he believed, but because he acted, and the old self was beginning to lose authority. One command at a time. There is a principle taught quietly in monasteries, dojos, and elite military academies. It isn't glamorous, it isn't inspirational, it is merciless. Practice without gaps. Not perfect practice, not extreme practice. Practice without gaps. Misdays are not just misdays. They are identity fractures. They whisper, it's okay to slip. It's okay to drift. It's okay to negotiate. And the brain listens. Raphael began to understand. Discipline wasn't about intensity. It was about continuity. So he designed his life around one rule. No 0 days. Even on the worst days. If he couldn't train hard, he stretched. If he couldn't read an hour, he read 5 pages. If he couldn't work deeply, he worked lightly. But he never allowed the chain to break. Because every time you skip, you teach the brain. Escape is acceptable. And every time you show up, even small, you teach, we do this. Always. He didn't brag about it. He didn't post about it. His life began to resemble a quiet ritual. Wake. Command. Execute. The world outside still chaotic. Emotions still unpredictable. But beneath everything, a current of steadiness grew. He realized warriors do not trust motivation. They trust structure. And the mind, once hostile, slowly began to obey. Not because he yelled, not because he pumped himself up, but because repetition trains loyalty. The mind had found its commander. Most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because their environment is engineered for defeat. Decision fatigue ambushes them the second they wake up. What should I wear? What should I eat? Should I work now or later? Should I scroll first? Tiny choices. Invisible, draining willpower. Raphael began thinking like a strategist. He didn't trust his future self. He planned for his weakest moments. Warriors prepare when they are strong, for when they will be weak. So, he pre-solved obstacles. Clothes laid out. Shoes ready. Water filled. Notebook opened to the next page. Workspace cleared the night before. He created friction against bad habits. Junk food out of the house. Apps deleted. Phone parked across the room. Timers set for deep work. And he created smooth pathways for good ones. Reminder cards. Visible checklists. Simple routines. No thinking. Just follow the system. He realized something profound. Discipline isn't about force. It's about design. When the war is won in the environment, the battle inside the mind becomes quiet. The training no longer felt heroic. It felt inevitable, like gravity. And the old version of Raphael, impulsive, chaotic, distracted, began to dissolve. Not in a single moment, but through 1,000 tiny strategic decisions. Change rarely announces itself. There was no dramatic choir, no spotlight from the heavens, just small moments. A coworker looked at him and said, "You're different lately." Steadier. A friend asked, "How do you stay so consistent?" His mirror reflected a new posture. Not larger muscles. Greater presence. He was quieter, less reactive, less interested in excuses from himself or anyone else. There was still fear, still weakness, still temptation, but they felt like weather systems now passing through, not controlling him. One evening, sitting in the same cafe where everything began, Raphael noticed something. The urge to run was gone. He no longer chased motivation videos, no longer searched for secrets, no longer fantasized about overnight change. He had become the thing he once saw it, and then like a hidden door unlocking the deeper truth revealed itself. Training your mind like a warrior isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming sovereign, free from the dictatorship of impulse, free from the lie that you are stuck, free from the narrative that your past controls you. He understood now. The fearful voice wasn't an enemy. It was outdated programming, built by years of comfort and avoidance. And warriors do not destroy the frightened part. They retrain it, guide it, lead it. His identity shifted quietly from, "I hope I can stay disciplined," to "This is simply who I am." And once identity shifts, action becomes natural. He wasn't forcing discipline anymore. He was expressing it. There is a myth many people cling to, that one day, motivation will arrive. That someday, life will become easier. That eventually, the right mood, the right timing, the right energy will appear. But Raphael learned the truth. Ease is the lie. Training is the path. Warriors are not superhuman. They are ordinary people who made a vow. "I will not obey the voice of weakness anymore." And they live that vow through structure, repetition, and identity. No audience, no applause. Just relentless self-command. Now it becomes your question. What voice commands your life? The voice trained by comfort, or the one forged through intention? Because right now, at this moment, you stand where Raphael once stood, between the life you tolerate and the life you are capable of becoming. No course will do it for you. No motivation guru. No temporary burst of inspiration. Only this. Small actions. No gaps. Pre-solved obstacles. Identity built through daily command. That is how you train your mind like a warrior. And if this message resonates, if somewhere deep inside you feel that pull, don't let it fade. Declare it publicly. Own it. Drop this in the comments. From today, mind first. Because once you speak it, you become accountable. And if you want more films like this, deeper, darker, more transformative, subscribe. Not for entertainment, but because you're choosing to step into the training. And remember this, the line that carried Raphael through storms. If you quit now, you train quitting. If you continue, you train destiny. Choose carefully. Your future self is watching.